The wind off Lake Erie cut through Ethan Carter's jacket as he trudged down State Street, his boots crunching against a thin layer of February snow. Erie, Pennsylvania, was gray and quiet at 6 p.m., the downtown lights flickering like tired stars against a bruised sky. Ethan, 24, carried the weight of more than the cold hospital bills, overdue rent, and the ache of watching his mother Lila fade under the hum of fluorescent hospital lights. His younger brother Noah was still in high school, his dreams of engineering school pinned to a corkboard in their cramped apartment, a future Ethan couldn't afford to promise. He ducked into the Brew, a corner coffee shop where the air smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, a brief escape from the grind of his life. Ethan worked mornings as a mechanic at a garage on Peach Street, nights as a delivery driver for a local diner, and weekends juggling online community college courses. His hands, rough with calluses and stained with grease, trembled as he counted out coins for a $2 black coffee. The barista, a kid with a nose ring, waved him off. On the house. "Man, you look like you need it." Ethan nodded, too tired to argue, and slid into a booth by the window. The coffee was bitter, grounding, a small anchor in a sea of exhaustion. His phone buzzed a text from Noah. "Mom's coughing again. Doc says we need new meds. $400. Ethan's stomach sank. He had $37 in his account, and rent was due in 3 days. He rubbed his eyes, the weight of it all pressing down like a hydraulic jack. "You're Ethan Carter, aren't you?" The voice was low, polished, cutting through the shop's hum. Ethan looked up, startled. A woman stood by his booth, maybe late 60s, her silver hair swept into a neat bun, her navy coat tailored sharp against the winter chill. Her eyes, a piercing gray, studied him with an intensity that felt like recognition, though he was sure he'd never seen her before. "Yeah," he said, cautious. "Do I know you?" She smiled faintly, sliding into the booth across from him without asking. "Margaret Sullivan. Maggie, if you prefer. I've seen you here before, always counting coins like they're your last." Her tone wasn't cruel, just direct, like she was stating the weather. Ethan stiffened, his fingers tightening around the coffee mug. "I get by. You do more than that," she said, leaning forward slightly. "You're carrying a family. Your mother's sick, isn't she? And your brother, bright kid, wants to build bridges or something." His jaw tightened. "How do you know that Erie's small? People talk." She paused, her eyes softening but not wavering. "I'm a widow, Ethan. I run a foundation, own properties, more money than I need. But I'm alone. I've seen the world, and I see you under a weight no one your age should carry." Ethan shifted, uneasy. "What's this about?" Maggie folded her hands, her diamond ring catching the light. "Marry me." He laughed, a short, sharp sound, thinking it a joke. Her face didn't change. "I'm not joking," she said. "Marry me, and I'll clear your debts. I'll get your mother the best care specialists, treatments, whatever she needs. I'll pay for your brother's education, all the way through college. You'll have a life, not a sentence." Ethan stared, his coffee forgotten. "Why me? This is insane." Maggie's smile was small, almost sad. "Because I see something in you, kindness, strength, the kind of heart that doesn't break easy. I'm not asking for love, Ethan. You'll have your own room, your own life. I just want a companion, someone to share this with." She gestured vaguely, as if her wealth were a shadow trailing her. "Think about it." She slid a card across the table, cream-colored, embossed with Margaret Sullivan, Sullivan Foundation, and stood. "I'll be at my estate tomorrow evening. Come, if you're ready to talk." Ethan watched her leave, the bell above the door chiming softly. The card felt heavy in his hand, her words heavier. He didn't move for a long time, the coffee cooling, the world outside blurring into streaks of snow. 3 days later, Ethan stood outside a wrought iron gate on Lake Road, the Sullivan mansion looming behind it like something out of a novel. Stone walls rose 3 stories, flanked by turrets and arched windows that glowed gold against the dusk. The wind off Lake Erie carried a sharp, clean bite, and Ethan's breath fogged as he pressed the intercom. His truck, parked a block away, felt like a relic from another life. The gate buzzed open, and a man in a crisp suit, Thomas Reed, Maggie's estate manager, led him inside. The foyer was a cathedral of wealth. Marble floors, a chandelier dripping crystal, a curved staircase with a mahogany banister. Ethan's boots, clean but scuffed, felt loud against the polished stone. Maggie waited in a sitting room, her posture straight, a glass of water in her hand. She wore a simple cream sweater and slacks, but her presence filled the space like a current. "You came," she said, her voice warm but measured. Ethan nodded, his hands in his pockets. "Couldn't afford not to." She gestured to a leather armchair. "Sit, tell me what's changed." He sat, his knees stiff. "Mom's meds ran out yesterday. Noah's school sent a final notice. I've got nothing left to sell, no hours left to work." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the weight. "I don't get why you're doing this, but if you're serious, I'm in." Maggie studied him, her gray eyes unreadable. "I am serious. My terms are simple. A legal marriage, a public commitment. You live here, share meals when I ask, attend events as needed. You keep your freedom, no expectations, beyond respect and loyalty. In return, your family's cared for, all debts gone, your mother's treatment covered, Noah's education secured." Ethan's throat tightened. "What's the catch?" "There's always a catch," she said, her smile faint. "But it's not what you think. I'm old, Ethan, not blind. I know this looks strange. People will talk. They always do. But I've lived long enough to stop caring about their noise." He exhaled, his fingers drumming his knee. "Okay, let's do it." Within a week, the paperwork was done. A quiet civil ceremony took place at Erie City Hall, witnessed by Thomas and a family friend of Maggie's. Ethan wore a borrowed suit, his hands steady but his heart racing. Maggie, in a tailored white dress, looked regal, her smile small but genuine. The officiant's words, blurred vows, promises, a ring on his finger that felt heavier than gold. By dusk, Ethan Carter was married to Margaret Sullivan, the wealthiest woman in Erie. The mansion was a world unto itself. Ethan's wing had a bedroom bigger than his old apartment, with a 4-poster bed, silk curtains, and a view of the lake that shimmered like liquid silver under the moon. Servants moved silently, delivering pressed clothes, hot meals, and polite nods. Maggie kept her word. Leela's treatment began with a specialist flown in from Pittsburgh, her cough easing within days. Noah's tuition was paid, his desk now cluttered with engineering textbooks and a new laptop. Debt collectors stopped calling. Ethan quit his delivery job, keeping only the garage for a sense of normalcy. But the mansion was too quiet, too perfect. Chandeliers gleamed, Persian rugs muffled every step, but something felt off. The third floor had a heavy oak door, always locked, guarded by Thomas or a rotating staff member. Ethan asked about it once, casually. Over dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a glass of wine he barely touched. Maggie's smile tightened. "My study," she said. "Private, you understand." He didn't, but he nodded, the weight of her generosity keeping his questions at bay. Still, the door haunted him. At night, lying in his too-soft bed, he'd hear faint sounds, musing like a violin, or a woman's voice, low and indistinct. He told himself it was the wind, the old house settling, but the unease grew. Maggie was kind but distant. She dined with him each evening, asking about his day, his mother's progress, Noah's classes. Her questions were gentle, her manners flawless, but there was a wall, invisible yet solid. She'd retire early, always to the third floor, always alone. Ethan felt like a guest in a museum, surrounded by beauty but afraid to touch anything. One afternoon, needing air, Ethan drove to the community center downtown. A brick building, Maggie's foundation funded. Kids painted murals in the courtyard, their laughter sharp against the gray February sky. Ethan wandered inside, drawn by the smell of fresh paint and the hum of activity. A young woman, maybe 20, was organizing art supplies at a table. Her dark hair was tied back, her hands quick and sure as she sorted brushes. "You lost?" she asked, glancing up with a half-smile. "Nah, just looking," Ethan said, gesturing vaguely. "This place is something." "It's Maggie's baby," she said, her voice warm. "I'm Sophie Nugent, volunteer here. You're Ethan, right? The new guy in her life." He stiffened, but her smile was kind, not mocking. "Yeah, that's me." She tilted her head, studying him. "You don't look like you're drowning in champagne yet." He laughed, surprised. "It's not that kind of life." They talked for an hour about the center, the kids, the way Erie felt like a city holding its breath. Sophie was studying to be a social worker. Her evenings spent here, teaching art to kids who reminded her of herself at their age. She was quiet but sharp, her empathy a contrast to the mansion's sterile grandeur. When Ethan left, he felt lighter, like he'd found a piece of the world he'd been missing. Back at the mansion, The locked door loomed larger. One night, after a dinner of grilled salmon and asparagus, Ethan lingered in the hallway, the violin's faint hum drifting from the third floor. He climbed the stairs, his boots soft on the runner, and paused before the oak door. The handle was cold, unyielding. Thomas appeared, silent as a shadow. "Mr. Carter, that area's restricted." "Why?" Ethan asked, his voice low but firm. "Mrs. Sullivan's orders," Thomas said, his face unreadable. "Please." Ethan stepped back, but the question burned. The next day, he drove to the community center again, finding Sophie in the courtyard, sketching with a group of kids. "You know Maggie well?" he asked, helping her carry a box of supplies. "Well enough," Sophie said, wiping charcoal from her fingers. "She's private. Funds this place, but doesn't hover. People say she was different before her husband died. Robert Sullivan, car accident, maybe 20 years ago, left her everything. Everything like what?" Ethan pressed. Sophie shrugged. "The mansion, the foundation, half the properties on the lakefront. Some say she was never the same after. Keeps to herself, mostly." Ethan nodded, the door in his mind growing heavier. That night, he heard the violin again, clearer now, followed by a woman's voice. Maggie's, he was sure. He didn't sleep, the sound looping in his head like a warning. 2 weeks later, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. After dinner steak, roasted potatoes, Maggie's usual quiet questions, he followed her to the third floor. She paused at the landing, sensing him. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but tired. "You're curious." "I hear things," he said, stepping closer. "Music, your voice, behind that door. I deserve to know what's going on." She studied him, her gray eyes softening. "You do." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a brass key, its weight catching the hallway's dim light. "Tomorrow night, after the staff's gone, come alone." Ethan took the key, his fingers closing around it like a vow. That night, he lay awake, the mansion's silence louder than ever. The key sat on his nightstand, glinting like a question he wasn't sure he wanted answered. But he knew one thing. Whatever lay behind that door would change everything. Ethan Carter held the brass key like it might burn him, its weight a quiet pulse against his palm. The Sullivan mansion was silent at midnight, the Lake Erie wind rattling the tall windows like a restless spirit. He stood outside his bedroom door, the third floor's oak barrier looming in his mind. Maggie's words, "come alone," echoed, both an invitation and a warning. He didn't move, not yet. The key was a door to answers. But Ethan wasn't sure he was ready for what lay beyond. The past month had been a blur of gratitude and unease. His mother Lila was stronger, her cough softer under the care of a Pittsburgh specialist. Maggie had flown in. Noah, his 16-year-old brother, came home from school with stories of robotics club and a scholarship application. His eyes bright with a future Ethan had never dared imagine. The debts, hospital bills, back rent, Noah's overdue tuition were gone, erased by Maggie's quiet efficiency. Ethan's life, once a treadmill of exhaustion, now felt like a strange dream, too polished, too still. But the mansion was a puzzle, with missing pieces. Maggie Sullivan, his 68-year-old wife, was kind dinners of roasted lamb or grilled salmon, questions about his day delivered with a warm smile but distant, retreating to her private world each night. The locked door on the third floor was the heart of it, a shadow Ethan couldn't ignore. He'd heard the violin again, faint and mournful, and Maggie's voice, low and indistinct, behind that heavy oak. Thomas Reed, her estate manager, guarded it like a vault, his clipped restricted. Mr. Carter cutting off every question. Ethan worked mornings at the garage, the smell of motor oil and metal grounding him. Afternoons, he'd visit the community center downtown, drawn by its noise, kids laughing, paint cans clattering, the hum of life. Sophie Nguyen, the 20-year-old volunteer, was a constant there, her dark hair tied back, her hands quick with a paintbrush or a stack of worksheets. She didn't ask about the mansion or Maggie, just talked about the kids, her social work classes, the way Erie's winters felt like a test of will. Her quiet presence was a contrast to the mansion's sterile grandeur, and Ethan found himself lingering longer each visit, their conversations a small rebellion against the weight of his new life. The next evening, Ethan waited until the mansion's staff had gone. The clock in the foyer ticked past 11 p.m., its rhythm steady against the lake's distant churn. He climbed the staircase, the runner muffling his steps, the brass key cold in his pocket. The third-floor hallway was dim, lit by sconces that cast long shadows. The oak door stood at the end, its brass handle gleaming like a challenge. Ethan paused, his breath shallow, then slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click, the sound final. Like a circuit closing dot, the door creaked open, revealing a room bathed in soft gold light. Dust motes floated in the air, catching the glow of a single lamp. The space was small, intimate, unlike the mansion's sprawling grandeur. A tall mahogany cabinet stood against one wall, its carvings worn but intricate. A faded armchair sat before it, draped in a wool shawl. In the center, a table held a leather-bound folder, thick and weathered. The air smelled of old paper and lavender, heavy with memory. Ethan stepped inside, his boots soft on the hardwood. His eyes landed on the folder. He opened it, his fingers careful, as if it might crumble. Inside were photographs, dozens, some yellowed, others crisp. Most showed a younger Maggie, her hair dark, her smile wide, at galas, on beaches, in gardens. But others caught his breath. A man, maybe 30, with Ethan's jawline, his brown eyes, stood beside her, in one. They sat on a pier, lake, Erie glinting behind them. In another, the man held Maggie's hand, his smile easy, unguarded. Under the photos were letters, handwritten, folded tight. Ethan picked one, dated 1987, and read, "Dear James, I waited at the cafe again. You promised you'd come. I don't understand why you're pulling away. I love you. Please, just talk to me." The signature was Maggie's, her script sharp but trembling. Ethan's chest tightened. He set the letter down, his mind racing. "You're here." Maggie's voice came from the doorway, soft but steady. She stood in a long gray robe, her silver hair loose, her face calm but etched with something raw. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Ethan turned, the letter still in his hand. "Who's James?" Maggie stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the armchair. He didn't move, his eyes locked on hers. She sighed, crossing to the cabinet and leaning against it. "James Carter, your father." The words hit like a wrench to the chest. Ethan's knees buckled, but he caught himself on the table. "My father, you knew him." Maggie nodded, her eyes distant. "Long before he met your mother. He was a mechanic, like you. Kind, stubborn, with a laugh that made you feel like the world wasn't so heavy. I met him in '85, after my first husband, Robert, died. I was lost, alone, and James. He saw me, not my money, not my name." Ethan's jaw clenched. "What happened?" "I fell in love," she said simply. "He didn't. I thought his kindness was more, but when I asked him to marry me, he laughed not cruelly, but like I'd told a bad joke. Said I was a distraction, not a future." It broke me. Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. "I buried that pain, built a life, but when I saw you in that coffee shop, you looked so much like him. Same eyes, same weight in your shoulders." Ethan stepped back, the folder shaking in his hands. "So this marriage, what? Revenge? You wanted to punish me for what he did?" Maggie's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "At first, yes, I wanted his son to feel what I felt, trapped, powerless. But you weren't him, Ethan. You were kinder, stronger. You respected me, even when you didn't have to. And she paused, her voice barely a whisper. "I fell for you, not as a ghost, but for you." Ethan's breath was shallow, his mind a storm. "This is messed up, Maggie. You used me." "I did," she admitted, her voice raw, "but it changed. I didn't expect to care, to want you to stay for you, not him." He turned away, staring at the cabinet, its carvings blurring. "What's in there?" Maggie hesitated, then crossed to it, unlocking it with a smaller key from her robe. Inside were more letters, a journal, a faded photo of James working on a car, grease on his cheek, and a documenta will, dated a month ago, naming Ethan Carter as her sole heir. Ethan's eyes widened. "You're giving me everything, not because I owe you," she said, her voice firm, "because I trust you. Because you gave me something I thought was gone hope." Ethan backed away, the room closing in. "I need air." "Ethan," she called, but he was already out the door, the key left on the table, the weight of her words heavier than the mansion itself. The next morning, Ethan drove to the garage, the lake's gray expanse a blur outside his window. He worked in silence, replacing a carburetor, the rhythm of wrench and sockets steadying his pulse. Maggie's confession looped in his head, her love for his father, her pain, her shift from revenge to something deeper. He didn't know what to feel: anger, pity, betrayal, or something softer. UNNAMAABL. At noon, he headed to the community center, needing Sophie's quiet presence. She was in the art room, helping a kid mix paint, her laugh light against the chatter. When she saw him, her smile faded. "You okay? You look like you haven't slept." "Not much," he admitted, leaning against the wall. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's story?" She tilted her head, setting the paint can down. "Sometimes. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, not a social worker. Said art was a waste. But I chose my own path." She paused, her eyes searching his. "What's your story doing to you?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Maggie. She's not who I thought." Sophie nodded, not pushing. "She's private, but she's good to this place. Funds our programs, never asks for credit. Whatever's going on, you don't have to carry it alone." Her words stayed with him as he drove back to the mansion. Maggie was in the garden, pruning roses, her hands steady in leather gloves. She looked up, her face guarded but hopeful. "You came back, didn't know where else to go," he said, his voice low. "I'm not okay with what you did, Maggie, using me like that, even if it changed." "I know," she said, setting the shears down. "I can't undo it, but I can be honest now. Ask me anything." He hesitated, then asked, "Why keep that room locked? Why hide it?" She looked toward the lake, her voice soft. "Because it's where I kept my shame. James's rejection wasn't just a no, it was proof I wasn't enough. I locked it away, but it never left me, until you." Ethan's throat tightened. "I'm not him. I know," she said, her eyes meeting his. "And that's why I'm here, asking you to stay not as his shadow, but as you." He didn't answer, just nodded, the weight of her words settling like snow. That night, they ate, in silence, pot roast, carrots, a single candle flickering between them. Maggie didn't push, and Ethan didn't pull away. Something had shifted, not trust, not yet, but a crack in the wall between them. Spring crept into Erie, the lake's ice thinning, the air softening with the scent of budding trees. Ethan and Maggie found a rhythm, not love, not friendship, but a quiet partnership. He joined her at foundation events, his borrowed suit stiff but his smile genuine. She visited Lila at the hospital, bringing books and a warmth that made Lila smile for the first time in months. Noah came to the mansion on weekends, awed by the library, his engineering sketches spreading across the dining table. But the locked room's shadow lingered. Ethan didn't return to it, but its contents: Maggie's letters, the will, his father's face haunted him. He spent more time at the community center, helping Sophie with workshops, their conversations growing longer, deeper. One afternoon, as they cleaned paintbrushes, she asked, "You ever think about what you want? Not for your mom, your brother, but you?" He paused, the brush dripping blue. "Haven't had time to think about that." "You should," she said, her voice gentle. "You're more than what you carry." Her words stuck, a seed planted in cracked soil. That night, Ethan found Maggie in the sitting room, reading by the fire. "I need to know something," he said, sitting across from her. "If I stay, what does that mean for us?" Maggie closed her book, her eyes steady. "It means we build something real. Not love, if you don't want it, but trust. A life we choose, not one we're trapped in." He nodded, the fire's warmth easing the knot in his chest. "I'm trying, Maggie, but I need time." "I've got plenty of that," she said, her smile soft but certain. Summer arrived, the lake sparkling, under a relentless sun. Ethan's life settled, Maggie's generosity, Leela's recovery, Noah's excitement for college applications. But the peace was fragile. One evening, as Ethan helped Sophie set up for a community art show, a woman approached, her face sharp with recognition. "You're Maggie Sullivan's husband," she said, her voice loud enough to turn heads. "Must be nice, climbing that ladder." Ethan froze, his hands full of flyers. Sophie stepped in, her voice calm. "He's here helping kids, not climbing anything." The woman smirked and walked off, but the words lingered. Ethan drove home in silence, the lake's reflection a blur. Maggie was waiting in the foyer, her face pale. "You heard," she said. "Small town." He replied, his voice tight. "They think I'm using you." "They're wrong," she said, stepping closer. "But they'll talk. They always do." He met her eyes, seeing not just her wealth, but her vulnerability. "I'm not running, Maggie, but I'm not sure I'm strong enough for this." "You are," she said, her hand brushing his arm. Because you're not alone. That night, Ethan sat on his balcony, the lake a dark mirror below. Sophie's words, "You're more than what you carry," and Maggie's "You're not alone" wove together, a lifeline in the storm. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew he wasn't walking away. Not yet. The summer sun hung low over Lake Erie, painting the water gold as Ethan Carter stood in the Sullivan Mansion's garden, pruning shears idle in his hand. The roses, Maggie's pride, bloomed fierce and red, their scent heavy in the August heat. Ethan, now 25, felt the weight of the past 6 months. Maggie's confession, the locked room's secrets, the whispers at the community center. His marriage to Margaret Sullivan, the 68-year-old widow who'd pulled him from the edge of ruin, was no longer just a deal. It was a partnership, fragile but real, built on truths neither had expected to share. Maggie had kept her promises. Ethan's mother, Lila, was in remission, her lungs clearer, her laughter a sound Ethan hadn't heard in years. Noah, his 16-year-old brother, was a high school senior, his engineering portfolio growing alongside his confidence, thanks to a scholarship Maggie had quietly arranged. The debts that once choked Ethan, hospital bills, rent, Noah's school fees, were gone, replaced by a life he barely recognized. But the mansion, with its chandeliers and silent corridors, still felt like a borrowed coat, too grand, too heavy. The locked room on the 3rd floor no longer haunted him. Its contents, Maggie's letters to his father, James, her journal of unrequited love, the will naming Ethan her heir, were a wound he'd faced. Maggie's admission that she'd married him to punish a ghost but stayed for his heart had shifted something in him. Not love, not in the way stories promised, but trust. A quiet bridge between them. They shared dinners, grilled trout, roasted vegetables. Her questions about his day answered with his own about her foundation. They attended events, Ethan's borrowed suits less stiff, her smile less guarded. They were building, not a romance, but a life. Sophie Nugent, the 20-year-old volunteer at the community center, was a different kind of anchor. Her quiet presence sorting paint cans, laughing with kids, asking Ethan what he wanted grounded him in a way the mansion couldn't. Their conversations, once casual, had deepened, her empathy a mirror to his own buried hopes. But Ethan kept a distance, not out of disloyalty to Maggie, but because he wasn't sure who he was outside his obligations. September brought a chill to Erie, the lake's waves sharper, the air crisp with falling leaves. Ethan was at the garage, replacing a timing belt, when his phone buzzed. Thomas Reed, Maggie's estate manager, his voice tight. "Mrs. Sullivan's unwell. Come home." Ethan dropped everything, his truck rattling down Lake Road. The mansion's foyer was too quiet, the chandeliers light cold. Thomas met him at the staircase. "She's in her room. Doctor's with her." Maggie lay in her 4-poster bed, her silver hair fanned across the pillow, her face pale but calm. A heart monitor beeped softly, its rhythm unsteady. The doctor, a woman in her 50s, pulled Ethan aside. "Congestive heart failure," she said. "Her age, her stress, it's caught up. We're managing, but it's serious." Ethan nodded, his throat tight, and sat by Maggie's side. Her hand, cool and frail, found his. "Don't look so scared," she whispered, her gray eyes steady. "I've lived a long life. You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice rough. "Not yet." She smiled, faint but real. "Read to me, that book on the nightstand." He picked up a worn copy of The Great Gatsby, her favorite, and read, his voice steadying as he traced Nick Carraway's words. Maggie closed her eyes, her breathing easing, the monitor's beep a quiet metronome. Hours passed, the lake's waves a distant hum through the window. Ethan stayed, reading until his voice grew hoarse, her hand still in his. Maggie rallied. For a week, strong enough to sit in the garden, wrapped in a shawl, the roses fading around her. Ethan brought her, Tyrol Grey, no sugar, and sat beside her, their silence comfortable. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice soft, "about the foundation. I want you to take it over." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Me? I'm a mechanic." "Maggie, I don't know how to run a charity." "You know how to care," she said, her eyes fierce. "That's enough. The rest, you'll learn." He didn't argue, but the weight of it settled like a new debt. That night, he drove to the community center, needing Sophie's clarity. She was in the art room, sketching a mural, design waves, a pier, a sunrise. "You look lost," she said, setting her pencil down. "More like found," he said, leaning against the table. Maggie's sick, heart's failing. She wants me to run her foundation. Sophie's eyes softened. That's big. You think you can do it? Don't know, he admitted. But she believes I can. That's something, it's everything, Sophie said, her voice gentle. You're not just her husband, Ethan. You're her legacy. Her words stayed with him, a light in the fog. He returned to the mansion, finding Maggie in the sitting room, a fire crackling. I'll do it, he said. The foundation. But you've got to stick around to show me how. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Fragile but bright. Deal. October painted eerie in rust and gold, but Maggie's strength waned. She spent more days in bed, her breath shallow, her hands cold. Ethan read to her, brought her soup noodle, her favorite tanned, played her old vinyls, the violin's hum filling the room. Leela visited, her own recovery a quiet miracle, and held Maggie's hand, thanking her for saving her son. Noah came, his sketches of bridges now blueprints, and told Maggie about his college offers, his voice thick with gratitude. That one evening Maggie called Ethan to her room. A lawyer waited, a new will in hand. I've made changes, she said, her voice faint but firm. The estate, the foundation, it's yours. Not because of guilt, but because you're the man I trust to carry it. Ethan's eyes stung. Maggie, I don't, she said, her hand on his. You've given me more than you know. These months, your kindness, your choice to state it's enough. The lawyer left, and Ethan sat with her, the fire's glow softening the room's edges. That room upstairs, she said, her eyes distant. It wasn't just about James. It held funds, grants I kept secret, for the community center, scholarships, shelters. I didn't want the world's eyes on it. You'll find the details in the cabinet. Ethan nodded, the locked room's weight lifting. Its secret's now a gift. Why hide it? Pride, she said, her smile wry, and fear. But you're not afraid, Ethan. That's why it's yours. Maggie passed in November, her breath fading as dawn broke over the lake. Ethan was by her side, reading Gatsby's final pages, her hand in his. Thank you, she whispered, her voice a thread, for seeing me. Her eyes closed, a smile lingering, and the monitor flatlined. Ethan sat still, the book open, the lake's lights spilling across the room. Grief came, not sharp but deep, like the tide pulling at the shore. The memorial was quiet, held at the community center. Neighbors, foundation staff, and kids, Sophie taught, filled the room. Their stories of Maggie's quiet generosity, weaving a tapestry Ethan hadn't fully seen. Sophie stood by him, her hand brushing his arm, her presence a steady warmth. She was proud of you, she said, her voice soft. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. I didn't expect to care this much. That's what makes you you, she said, her eyes meeting his. After, Ethan walked to the pier on Lake Erie, Maggie's favorite spot, the wind sharp against his face. He thought of her letters, her pain, her choice to trust him. I forgive you, he whispered to the waves. And thank you. Winter returned, the lake freezing under a steel sky. Ethan took over the Sullivan Foundation. His days split between the garage and board meetings, his nights studying nonprofit law with Sophie's help. The mansion felt less like a cage, its rooms filled with plants, workshops, scholarships, a new wing for the community center. He used Maggie's wealth to fund Noah's engineering school, Lila's ongoing care, and programs for kids like the ones Sophie taught. Sophie became a constant, her laughter a balm, her sketches now pinned to Ethan's office walls. They worked, late, shared coffee, talked about dreams, hers to open a youth art program, his to make Erie a place where no one carried his old burdens. One evening, as snow fell outside the center, Ethan looked at her, paint smudged on her cheek, and said, You've been here through everything. She smiled, her eyes warm. So have you. I don't want to do this alone, he said, his voice low. Not the foundation, not any of it. Her breath caught, but her smile widened. Then don't. They married the following spring, a small ceremony on the pier, the lake sparkling under a pale sun. Leela walked Ethan down the aisle, her strength a quiet triumph. Noah was best man, his grin wide. The community center, kids threw wildflowers, their laughter echoing. It wasn't grand, but it was real, built on choice, not obligation. The mansion became the Sullivan Community Hub, its doors open to Erie youth, its rooms alive with art, coding classes, and job training. The locked room was renamed the Sullivan Room of Renewal, housing Maggie's journals, her secret grants, and a scholarship fund in her name. Ethan carved a quote above the door. Love arrives in unexpected forms, but it always builds something lasting. One winter evening, Ethan and Sophie stood on the pier, their hands clasped, the lake a mirror under the stars. The mansion glowed behind them, its light spilling across the snow. "Think she'd be proud?" Ethan asked, his voice soft. Sophie leaned into him, her breath fogging the air. "She'd say you built more than she ever dreamed." Ethan smiled, the weight of the past, his debts, Maggie's pain, his own doubts now. A foundation, not a burden. The lake stretched before them, endless and calm, a promise of tomorrows they'd shape together.